The reception of Greedfall has been odd to me. I received comments telling me that Spiders had finally done it. They had hit the mark and made a genuinely good, if not great RPG, and I had to cover it. These comments fell away quick. And obviously, the reception wasn't isolated to people telling me to play it. If it was, it would not have shifted quite so many copies. There were also shallow, reductive headlines stating that Spiders had finally taken BioWare's place, or were at the very least filling the void left behind, with Spiders' CEO themselves stating this was part of their hopes with their new title. I may be presumptuous to argue with the company head, they know their business far better than I do, but I disagree with the comparison, even though I do understand it. The two of them have always focused on RPGs that emphasized presentation over nuanced decision making, but BioWare always had something Spiders did not, an absurd excess of cash and manpower which allowed that presentation to dazzle. Spiders, well, I'm not saying they shouldn't pick a fight like this, just that it's a fight that had to be fought not on BioWare's turf, and to Spiders' credit, they were at least clever about it. They focused their tales around settings and themes BioWare's epic scope and mainstream appeal wouldn't. In my experience, a low-key, dirty post-apocalyptic story on a Mad Max-style Mars. I can't imagine BioWare tackling this. Spiders can't fight BioWare on scale, so they went a more subversive route, with unique settings and small-scale titles, using that tighter focus to their advantage. But that isn't quite right now, is it? Despite their smaller scope, they still had issues with their worlds lacking in definition, worlds which are internally contradictory and downright ill-explained. Always dark and cynical in outlook, but always half-heartedly so. Despite this, my relationship with Spiders has up until now been one of half-charmed fascination. I have a fondness for their sloppy storytelling, oddball worlds, and janky mechanics. It made Spiders into an underdog that I enjoy rooting for, and now they are aiming so much higher. Greedfall is their most ambitious project to date, their most straightforwardly BioWare project to date, following 3 countries as they make inroads into the new world, how they butt heads with both each other and the natives. It has a large cast with plentiful potential conflict, a large setting bursting with apparent history and ancient mysteries which ripple into the current day. And you are placed at the center of all this. It's your job to fight, explore, and play games of politics for your nation. There is so much room here to excite, so much room here to intrigue, and so much room for questioning. And it's by far the dullest experience I've had with a game this year. I didn't want Spiders to be the next BioWare. I want them to be the first and most fascinating Spiders. And well, despite my disagreement with the intent and the reception, I cannot knock it on numbers. It has been a good seller for them, and it clearly has its fans. I'm not amongst them. Greedfall is a game that's trying to punch far above its weight, built on a shoddy foundation that it wants to ignore, while managing to deftly dodge every bit of promise that arises. And it does so while killing itself with conveniences and contrivances, both for itself and for the player. We've a long journey ahead of us. There will be spoilers fairly early on. I'll be jumping around in the plot a lot. Having played Greedfall yourself will help, but I hope to provide enough context for those who weren't planning on it. For those who can't watch this video in one go, there are timestamps in the description for each topic. I have a lot of points to make about mechanics and storytelling both, and YouTube affords me the time to make them. I hope with this video I'll take you on an adventure through a game that struggles to have any. Also, Merry Christmas, it is December after all. I can't deny, however, that Greedfall makes a good first impression. The opening hours mark the height of the storytelling and decision-making on display. We open having our portrait done by the most powerful character in the setting, a man we'll never see again, the artist Sir de Courtone. His portraits can shape your face, set your skills, and turn you from man to woman. Yeah, I saw that. That was a bloke moments ago. Courtone, could we please move a mite over? The sun is getting in the way of character creation. I had intended multiple runs for this video. When I was more optimistic, I thought I'd do 3, one for each of the 3 classes, which is pretty meaningless since you can build as you like. For a slew of reasons, I wound up only doing 2 runs, and honestly I'm surprised we have that many. I still did tackle all 3 classes, mind. Greedfall is using the same skeleton as Technomancer to handle stat growth, but the minor details have been switched around and there are a couple of minor additions to the gameplay, along with features reintroduced from Warlogs, albeit with some refinement. My first playthrough saw me base my appearance off an old tabletop character of mine, a quasi-Italian yet named after a Gaul Crixus. I had wanted to roleplay as the celebrity gladiator, but, well, that wasn't on the cards. There is, frankly, little roleplaying to be done. And a few hours in, I realized he looked like Prince Charming from Shrek, which improved my experience with Greedfall a good deal. This run was played on hard. My second playthrough was done with the intent of doing everything wrong. I had another RPG character I was going to play, a fantasy Irish gunslinger named Ivania, but I didn't want to sell one of my own characters down the river like that. So, Evil Anya here is only named that by coincidence. This was played on Extreme, the toughest difficulty. Either way, we're playing as Sade, the legate of the congregation, a fairly hefty position, especially so given our young age. We were given the job due to our possible competency and close relation to the D'Orsay family. The D'Orsay are the rulers of the congregation of merchants. What does the legate do, however? Well, we're basically a combat diplomat with an indeterminate amount of agency. Today, we're supposed to be departing with our cousin Constantine to the New World, the island of Teer, Fradee, with him acting as governor of our seemingly fledgling settlement of New Serene. But there is a problem.
Your cousin is nowhere to be found.
Well, the good news is we'll find him or get promoted.
I am sorry, sir. Truly, I must be going.
My lord, please, I beg you. Her Highness has personally requested I finish.
Thank you, cousin, for getting me out of that.
Oh hey, the first NPC I can talk to.
Sire, I'm sorry. I'm afraid that I won't make for good company.
On the way to our important business, a tutorial is lobbed at us.
And so the day has finally come. My royal fledglings are leaving the nest.
Accompanied by their most loyal and tenacious master of arms.
As loyal as your goal.
Oh, enough with the cold mercenary. I know you like us.
Just gonna say, Kurt, that was in my inventory. How'd you get it?
Fight with honor!
Kurt has been Sade and Constantine's master at arms since they were kids, and he's tagging along for the journey. I say he should take his own advice and stay out of our pockets. Let's think about that advice for a moment. He's been teaching us how to fight since we were kids. Honor has historically not been what wins battles. So, I disregard it and beat him, earning the right to skip the tutorial. And with that, we're left with one final farewell to make before we head out.
What is this? Have you not been taught to knock? I've asked 1,000 times. Oh, it's you, my dear child.
Sade's mother has fallen victim to the Malachor, a deadly plague ravaging the continent. Sade doesn't want to leave her side, but with rumours abound of a cure in the New World, she encourages Sade to go. She's happy her child might be saving their people, even if it's unlikely she'll live to see it. She's probably going to pass away before we even make landfall on Teer Fradee. Having been completely in the dark about the Plague plot before actually picking the game up, having dodged all spoilers and discussion of it pre-release, this was a strong reveal for me, and a good heroic drive for Sade's future actions, but it does also make me realise something about Sade in retrospect. It's hardly unique to them, it's a price paid by many cinematic RPG protagonists, that they have to half exist as a player-owned avatar espousing their choices, while simultaneously acting as their own character who has to justify them, yet with just enough flexibility to not be a total walking contradiction. That flexibility is often done by making them not have any character at all. There is an element to Sade I do truly enjoy, we'll see it later on in the prologue, but as their own person they so rarely get scenes to emote in any way, with small exceptions such as this. Sade is perhaps the flattest entity imaginable for 95% of the runtime.
All my blessings go with you, my child. Now, be off.
The opening does a really good job of being entertaining in its own right, while really selling Teer Fradee and making me want to get there. Following that scene with our mother, we head out into the city of Serene. I guess I'll call it Old Serene, because, you know, we got New Serene as well. Our surroundings are sickly, the streets claustrophobic, dirty and dilapidated, with alleys and roads cut off by crumbling infrastructure. The dying lay on bedrolls behind the barracks, and all that awaits them is a pyre in the town centre. Many people you speak to are in the early stages of the Malachor. The mood is dire all around, with the only bright spark being a barman saying that the Malachor is somehow not communicable person to person, which at least means people are going outside again. Yet whenever people talk about Teer Fradee, they brighten up. It's a land of mystery and wonder and hope, It's Untainted.
It is a magnificent place. Wild. Spared from your wars and your mines for now.
I can't wait to get there and fix that. Oh, and that's Vasco. He's the one captaining the vessel to take us over.
If all is in order, we will soon be embarking on your boat.
It's a ship, not a boat.
Apologies.
But we need Constantine before we can do that. And to check off a few chores besides. We gotta tell the ambassadors of our neighbouring countries Thélème and the Bridge Alliance of our departure. And Kurt asks if we can help with an inventory dispute he's been put in charge of. That's optional mine, but I'll probably do it. Now, I know this is an RPG, but there is frankly something hilarious about us of all people acting like an RPG character.
Oh, look! There goes the young noble, gutting bandits in a back alley like a common fish.
Old Serene hosts 4 side quests which are used to set up the Continental powers. All of them have already set up shop on Teer Fradee. Every nation is basically a nation of hats. There's the ultra-religious Thélème with a focus on magic, and the alchemical, ultra-scientific Bridge Alliance. Despite magic potions requiring alchemy, the two groups are tragically at war, which is portrayed in typical Spiders fashion.
To my knowledge, no one has yet seen any serious fighting.
We're part of the Congregation of Merchants, so I'll give you 3 guesses what we're all about, and we sit in the middle as a neutral party. Then we have the Coin Guard and the Naughts. Now, I might be missing some historical context for the Coin Guard, but they are a mercenary guild, and by far and away the largest military presence in the game. As in, Kurt is a Coin Guard. The man who was guarding and training the son of the Dorsey family is a mercenary. There are state militaries for each of the 3 nations, even if ours is only alluded to in incidental dialogue. But every nation, even the 2 warring ones, make heavy use of Coin Guard services. Now, I'm not against this by itself, properly set up and used as a narrative tool. There is plenty that could be said and done with the Coin Guard being as widespread as they are. I could buy us using it, no pun intended, that we are so into trading and privatization that we use a wholly private military for day-to-day operations. That could be fascinating. But, well, we clearly don't. It's just that our national military is never important to the story, so don't think about it. You may say, Snake, you did think about it, just then, but well, this world is so lacking in detail and contradictory that I really am just theorizing on the game's behalf. This detail of the Coin Guard being technically independent could be used for so much more conflict than it ever truly will be. There will be conflict, it'll just be, kind of crap. The Naughts are more believable, if only because the story makes a point of how they've acquired their position. They're the only seafaring force in the world. They utilize magic to ride the waves, a feat no other faction can replicate. They're the only ships you will see in the water, giving them immense sway that they'll never actually use for anything. What humble sailors they are.
Oh, there goes our inspiring legate, wearing the robes of that man he killed.
Both the Thélème and Bridge Ambassadors need us for a job. Both of them follow the exact same beats. In both cases, we're pointed to a person or persons that Ambassador wants brought to justice. These persons are using the Congregation's more lax religious or trading laws as a safe haven. It turns out in both cases that the Ambassador hid information about the culprit, and we ultimately must decide their fate. With the Thélème, it's a couple of heretics who turn out to be historians, staunch believers at that, who interpreted sacred tablets from one of their saints in a way the censor did not like. The tablets stating that a disciple of their prophet Saint Matthias, Saint Lucius, in his later years on Teer Fradee started hearing voices. To the Illuminated, this sounded like an accusation of one of their saints falling to madness, or worse, demonic possession. Despite knowing their interpretation to be correct, the historians are ready and willing to toss out their work and never speak of it again, but that wasn't enough for the censor. The Bridge, meanwhile, wants us to arrest a charlatan selling snake oil in our city. I'll confess, in a world where healing potions are real, I kinda have to respect that hustle. Well, he turns out to be a disgraced professor who fled the Al-Sad University. He held the controversial opinion of being against cruel tests performed on live humans. What small nuance there is to this is that the fake medicines he is selling on the road are experimental remedies in his hope to crack the Malachor. He's aware of his own hypocrisy, but claims to have only harmed people's wallets in his pursuits. Well, call me a softie or a contrarian, but I let everyone go.
What are you saying?
Yeah, we're the new kid, and we've just upset the guests. I get ready for Fradee to apologize on my behalf like so many protagonists past, as if I didn't know what I was doing. I'll take the reputation hit and be told to do better next time.
And you to a legate of the Congregation of Merchants, that you treat like an imbecile. This man is indeed an alchemist at the bridge, and he told me much about your disagreement of opinion.
And of course you sided with him.
Certainly not. I have no part to play in your quarrels, I just chased him from our city. Now, if you're still intent on placing him in irons, you need to capture him on your own lands.
I should...
Or not. Yeah, Fradee don't fucking play. He throws the book at the bastards. Yeah, we get Sahin to apologize. Meanwhile, Antonius just gets condescending in defeat. I'm still getting a rep here, but I'm gladly taking it after that. They expected to be able to run circles around the young Fradee, but they were not ready for the diplomatic monster that just walked through their door.
That's Fradee. Why is he taking bullets out of that box?
It's at the least an interesting decision we're dealing with here, well framed and with a few avenues to weigh up what we're doing. Since we can also see turning them in as a part of our job, we're trying to stay neutral here. We could allow these ambassadors to get what they wanted to appease them. That might dodge further fallout. While I clearly don't agree with going that route, it's justifiable for trying to keep tensions down. The Naughts and Congregation share a quest. It concerns a missing cabin boy. He's been kidnapped by a Congregation noble. Fradee learns that the Naught take more than coin as acceptable payment, and it used to be Congregation tradition to hand over a bunch of noble family kids in return for Naught services. Now that's no longer required, it's something individual families can opt into doing of their own discretion to make trade deals and so on. I do love that Vasco doesn't give much of a shit about the cabin boy until he learns it was a noble reneging on a deal. So I go and get him back from his heartbroken dad. The Coin Guard quest is just a ton of bureaucracy. It's not terribly interesting, but it does introduce stealth mechanics, which you can totally ignore by wearing the right shirt.
Oh look, it's you.
Stealth is no longer an upgradable stat. A small handful of quests ask you to engage with stealth to avoid reputation loss. In this case, we need to get a bunch of Coin Guard cargo on our ship by adding them to the manifest so they'll be loaded on. We basically just have to, bypass bureaucracy, which I'm fine with. Greedfall touts the existence of faction-restricted zones where you'll be attacked on sight. Again, if you're not wearing the right shirt. But throughout the game, I only recall these belonging to Naughts and only arising 2 or 3 times. I think it's because the Naughts have so little impact on the story after the first 5 hours that they can be sacrificed. I might be getting ahead of myself, but this reluctant feature is kind of revealing of how the game treats factions and the story. Why have it if you don't want to use it and don't want the players interacting with it? So yes, they are one of the few factions I was able to turn hostile, and I don't think the game accounted for that because they were no more hostile than when they were merely suspicious. So these are the best side quests on display. They're doing a good few things at once mechanically and narratively, introducing the core conflict of each group, a little bit of how they slot into the world, giving us a morality play and letting the player kick off their relationship with each group individually. If you think I'm setting a very low bar, well, we'll get there. That's 5 of the 6 factions, the 6 obviously being the Tier Fradee natives that we've yet to meet. Everyone else has already made it over to the new world, and we're going to be rubbing shoulders with these folks for hours to come. That TehSnakerer guy gleefully spoke of how the natives are being converted, and well, we know the bridge are over there and they're not against human experimentation, and we know they're trying to cure that Malachor. Now, these are side quests, and as such, you can skip right past each of them, and you'll lose a lot of this context. But, well, it's fascinating. The prologue is seeing you going out of your way to learn that absolutely everyone, including us, are bastards. So, here's to many more hours alongside them. Finding Constantine was nifty. You can track the bugger down by asking after him at the bar, finding a poorly written ransom note in town, wonder what that's all about. Or in my case, just walking past the building in which his kidnappers have imprisoned him. Well, you did a bang-up job, didn't you, Kurt? I'm sure he's honoured to be in that cell. I was side-questing at the time, so I came back for Constantine an hour later, but it's fine, he's not going anywhere. With the right talents, I can make a sneaky back entrance, or I can head up the front. Or meet the bandits to pay the ransom, or profit from the kidnapping. Constantine's up for some payback. If we hadn't already granted it, we may go and grant it. Let's hop over to the alternate reality. Mr. Fradee gunned it for Constantine, popped by to say goodbye to the ambassadors and shot off within about 20 minutes, time and tide wait for no one after all. Mr. Fradee took about 2 hours. Those side quests really do bulk out the runtime. I'm going to give the game some more credit since my positivity is about to nosedive from this already fairly lukewarm position. I fully expected that with a city this detailed, we would be brought back here somehow. But no, the journey to Teer Fradee is said to be a months-long one, and it's a one-way trip. It's one of those things I only noticed in retrospect. It goes a long way in making the old continent and Teer Fradee feel worlds apart. As the game goes on, the fumes of the old city become a hazy memory, somewhere to which you can never return. So, let's get going, we've got a game to talk about proper. I wouldn't be so excited.
Your cousin's enthusiasm is most impressive.
This journey is his long-awaited chance to prove his worth. He has a demanding father.
More likely he's just happy to be free of this hornet's nest.
I definitely know I am. That's certain.
Stations, lads! Wear and cut and ready hot to wear! Lively now, lively! Catch me a win!
There is a definitive moment where I have my first big doubt about Greedfall, and it's right here. Seeing the fairly built-up settlement of New Serene when I was expecting something small, something to build. While I know how petty this sounds, it will reverberate through more justifiable problems I have as we get out into Teer Fradee proper, but this was a bitter remedy to swallow. I may have misunderstood the setup. The way characters spoke, it sounded like Teer Fradee was relatively untouched, with Constantine being given the job of raising up a modest steading. Instead, he's taking over from Lady Morange, the former governess, and this is the very impressive result of 5 years on the island. We will not be seeing New Serene develop or change. Teer Fradee itself was related to us as a place of discovery and wonder, but looking at this, I can't help but feel like we've rolled up too late for any of it. Vasco's captaincy is taken out from under him and he's grounded. A higher ranking Naut has taken Vasco's ship and crew, and Vasco has been ordered to adventure with us for a bit. We're never given a reason why, but, well, he doesn't question it.
In any case, here I am at your service, for a while.
Off we go. We go and catch up with Constantine at the palace, and outside we're joined by the native Siora. She's the daughter of her clan's chief and is acting as their emissary, and has urgent business with Constantine.
What is this? Who is this amazing person in your company?
I am Siora, daughter of Bladnid, daughter of Meb. My mother is the Mal, the chief of our clan.
I am honored to make your acquaintance, Siora. This is incredible. You look so much alike you could be related.
Now, I haven't mentioned the birthmark, and I hardly need to explain it now as well. The reveal is pretty obvious, but we get so many people noting how we look like we're from here despite the fact that, you know, we're a creator character. And well, look at me. I hardly look like a native. I don't have their skin tone or hair coloration, but fuck it, I look like one. I went and forced these lines to make sense on my other playthrough.
Teer, why are you wearing the same clothes as Renaxe?
I just can't fucking win. If you're adding masks to a game, don't take them off during cutscenes, just let me ruin them. Regardless, we've got two jobs. Siora needs our help with a war between her clan and the Bridge Alliance, with Fradee proposing going over to negotiate a ceasefire, and that goes hand in hand with her other job, checking in with the governors of San Mateus and Hikmet, the Thélème and Bridge cities respectively. Siora joins our party, so let's get on the case. We must have a long journey ahead. Oh, we're here. Greedfall manages to make Teer Fradee feel incredibly small and artificial, and this led to any and all adventure being undercut by the conveniences given to the player. One side quest slipped in your journal by Corsilion tasks you to head out and brave the wilderness, so that you can litter it with quick travel camps. While this is an aesthetic choice I'm knocking, it does frame what we're doing. All of the camps are designated by burnt out campfires. You're not uncovering anything new for the non-natives or laying down a route for others to follow. Even as you make it further into the heart of the Isle than most any foreigner ever has, those campsites and other conveniences await you. All you're doing is walking in, relighting a fire, and plopping down a warp crate with everything you've stored anywhere, a crafting bench, and a point you never need actually walk to again. Here you go, you lazy Teleme bastards. I set up the camp in your camp. You learn of new zones from quests. It's only the first time heading to a new area you need to go to a connecting exit on another map. Eventually you'll cut down all travel to warping and then sprinting for a minute or two. Now I will say this is a negative for its artificiality, and you could say that if I'm going to complain about this, just ignore the camps. Just don't put them down. Well, there is another reason. I will eventually get to why this is a two wrongs not making a right kind of deal. Within an hour of arriving on Fradee, you can skip from one end of the island to the other. The game asks if you're sure about this while saying how long it will take, which is sort of curious as the game never actually has a time-sensitive situation where I would need to measure that travel time. There's one countdown throughout, and it's for healing a bunch of natives in a scene I'm spoiling on screen right now. They are all on the same map, and you have so long to succeed this bonus objective, I would need to decide to go and make an hours-long trek back to the shops in town to run the risk of failure. Every other timer I can recall is a waiting timer. Wait for a man to heal, wait for a meeting to come up. In every case, this meant I had to sprint to a camp, wait there, and come back, which is about as enthralling a piece of gameplay as that sounds. There is potential in this mechanic for challenges where you need to actually plot a course, since I believe the paths are not totally linear distance equal time affairs between maps, with geography and different exits I believe making some difference. It's hard to gauge since I never needed bother paying attention to it. It's likely a holdover from Technomancer where it was also unimportant. The point of all this rambling is, I never needed to weigh up, can I take this journey? Do I have the time? Do I have the resources? Am I prepared? Threat and uncertainty give an adventure, and Greedfall has none. Perhaps the biggest example, and one of the strangest, most ill-fitting mechanics for purpose I've seen in a good while, is the travel pause. Between each zone transition, you are deposited here to mask a load time that you will still see. It's a small clearing in the path. It has all of the amenities of camps and an incredibly well-stocked merchant to boot. Barring the tip-top of certain weapon types, this easily accessed, out in the middle of nowhere salesman is the proprietor of the best shop in the game, and he is absolutely everywhere you go. This results in every nook and cranny feeling like it's already been discovered and prepared for our arrival. A theme park version of exploration where danger is but an illusion, where a gift shop is never out of sight. You can pull an emergency cord anywhere if the ride is too bumpy. I can't feel like I'm taming the wilds if I'm never more than a minute from civilization. Outside of each of the cities sits a caravan. For 10 coin, you can quick travel to one of the other cities. For 10 coins, all you're doing is skipping the travel pause, replacing it with the load screen it replaces. These caravans are useful for all of the first 20 minutes you're on Fradee. You skip over a couple of zones, but seeing as you'll want to put down those camps, all you're doing is paying to put off content for later. You'll want those camps come quest time. And there are some smaller issues raising, or in this case failing to raise their heads here. The fact you can barely look up at all kills some possible standout moments. Late in the game when you're headed up a mountain pass towards the volcano sat at the center of the island, you just get an eyeful of ugly rock texture. I should be able to gaze up, see the scale of this thing that up until now has been at the background of many zones, dominating the skyline. Well, sometimes. It varies stage to stage, but that volcano often makes me think the island is actually quite unimpressive. It looks like a model from some angles and imposing from others. And speaking of the island itself, the wildlife. Every single animal the game over shares the exact same loot table. Each drops the same crafting ingredients and vendor trash. While their designs and attacks are somewhat distinct from one another, there's never any reason to hunt a specific one. You won't have to hunt anyway, trust me, they're not hiding. They're bloody everywhere. Every few feet, another mob of angry Teerfridian wildlife. I know it's a stock trope, the natives who live in peace with nature, but in this game it's impressive because fuck me, they're everywhere, and they are all up for a scrap. I realized after killing roughly 1,000 bears that I'm a walking goddamn ecological disaster. Oh yeah, speaking of the natives, I did resolve Siora's request. We're a bit too late to stop a battle from occurring.
Wait. We should go left here. It's a more difficult path, but it's much shorter.
Well, we'll be late either way, but you'll like me less if I take the long path. Siora's mother has been taken by the bridge, and Siora is none too happy about it. The fact she'll never do that in-game is why I refuse to upgrade anyone's equipment. A short ways away from the site of the battle are some ruins, and they are clearly not of native construction.
You certainly seem to know the place.
This site is sacred and taboo. Everyone knows where it is, but no one ever comes here. All these colors are so beautiful.
We'll have to check in later with Constantine about this. I do like a lot about the natives. They are perhaps the most nuanced faction in that they actually have a mix of bastards and good people that are actual characters. There are clan politics with some back and forth, but they are still guilty of this whole undercutting of adventure deal. My issue is petty but consistently annoying start to finish. No matter how deep in the island we go, the language barrier has been totally breached. The writing just gives them a truly grating speaking pattern, where they speak in full...
I come from Serene, a grand city on the continent of Gicane.
Full Gakanese sentences, obeying grammatical structure better than I do, but they supplant some nouns with Teer Fradean here and there.
But there are these bod irony who do not want me to set up shop here.
These what?
With such obvious context that every word has a complete one-to-one Gakanese equivalent. Natives rarely even speak their own language amongst each other. Wira Renaig say, wise men and women are Donegad, soldiers are bod irony, so on and so forth. They even utilize complex imagery and symbolism.
Honey dripping words.
I understand not wanting to write them to sound simple, regardless of intent. That would have likely ruffled some people's feathers for very little gain. It's easier to make them poetic instead, but it does hurt the illusion for me that every single person we meet is fluent in our language, no matter how isolated their village from our influence. Want to know how long we've been on the island? I mean this time. 15 years. That's when the bridge started building Hikmet. A few years later, the Thélème founded San Mateus, and New Serene's construction began 5 years ago. In that time, every native has essentially mastered our tongue.
Teer Fradee gives, Teer Fradee takes back.
I kinda doubt the Naught stuck around before then to give everyone lessons. Not to mention, because of how we act, the natives don't like dealing with us if they don't have to. There's a word that befuddles me when it comes to the natives because it befuddles the natives. They can get every Gakanese word right except the word demon, which seems to continually stump them. They struggle to comprehend this singular concept of an evil spirit. It's meant to illustrate that their concept of spirituality is so separate from ours that an evil spirit seems inconceivable. But they've been dealing with Thélème Inquisitors for 10 years now, and they seem fond of seeing the devil in everything. Unlike lions, the natives shouldn't be unfamiliar with this concept by now, but rather incredulous or annoyed by our presumptions. They should flinch or laugh at the word demon, not hit the one brick wall of understanding that's been erected.
The Lions have powerful weapons and very effective potions.
And that's another detail. Lions refers to Bridge Alliance soldiers, as they have lion insignias. But lions don't exist on Teer Fradee. They have Andrigs, Ulgs, Dosaintats, Tenlans, I'm reminded of something Ludolen said about Spider's writing priorities, and it remains true here.
This is because Spider has a fundamental problem that is at its worst in the Technomancer. This studio likes ideas, but not details.
Spiders has cool ideas and, at times, good imagery, but doesn't really think anything through. It doesn't lay down a foundation and doesn't care if things wind up hollow or worse, contradictory. Spiders raises a ton of questions, and not good questions. Good questions are matters of intrigue or curiosity, where you know a setting adds up, but it doesn't need to tell you everything. It makes you want to seek answers to enrich a setting, or invent your own. Spiders instead makes a surface-level caricature of reality, assumes its setting to be self-evident, and has me questioning how the setting even functions, with questions such as... why are the Coin Guard powerful? Why hasn't the Continental War reached Teer Fradee when both factions are there? Why do the natives refer to the bridge as lions when they have their own fauna? And this is because Spiders favor simplicity and striking imagery not just over, but often at the cost of verisimilitude. And nerds like me care about that, especially when I'm playing a tens of hours long RPG that asks me to be invested in the stakes of the world. I kinda have to believe in the world to care about it. It's for reasons like this that I won't knock too many holes in, say, Vanquish's setting, but I'll be a picky shit here. And in all of this complaining, the Codex is back. An auto mission from Technomancer has returned, and I'm somewhat glad for it. This codex catalogues people, places, animals, and ingredients. A handy reminder in my case due to taking week-long breaks in playing this. I do have a gripe regarding ingredients in that their entries only detail roughly where to find them and in what vague category of crafting they're used, with one point in intuition highlighting ingredient pickups. One half of this codex becomes useless, especially since, like animals, most ingredients are everywhere, with only blood sap having a map where I could notice it being particularly abundant. My real issue is there's no flavour to give depth to the world or meaning to the ingredients. No historical notes, old wives' tales, superstitions, jokes even. Just a cut and dry description of where and what for. Take hawthorn berries, for instance. Used in healing potions, the berries make one feel they're being watched and must perform better. I'll admit that joke is a little cliche and feels a bit out of step for Greedfall, but I can't say what wouldn't be out of step for Greedfall. Simple things like that can add any amount of personality or character to a setting, but the writing is also perfunctory. The section on characters groups them by faction, which is handy, but, you know, give me a rundown of the factions themselves on the tabs. Look, the factions are incredibly shallow, but for the love of God, make some effort to alleviate that. Each faction lacks any real history or culture. Surface level reads of them proves to be immediately correct and don't develop from there. We got science gone too far, religion gone too far, greed gone a bit over the line on a bad day. The Codex, even if it's just text on a page, could be used to start planting seeds of thought in a player's head, an affectation of depth that lets a player start characterizing for themselves. But everyone is a flat shade of cruel, if not evil. Science evil, religious evil, business evil. The congregation gets so little exploration, and I believe it goes hand in hand with Fradee being a non-character. Like the whole trading kids thing being an old practice not done anymore. So we used to be worse, but now we're just kind of dully evil. The congregation can't really have much flavor because it can't contradict Fradee. Fradee, who has very little going beyond possible compassion. But there is a quest that relates to the congregation. It says a bit here and there about us, and is, despite being rather run-of-the-mill for Greedfall, one of the most tedious quests I've ever played through. To really talk about a lot of issues I have with Greedfall, I need to spoil something now. Something I myself was spoiled on, and hopefully I won't annoy you with this because a lot of points I'm going to make from here on out refer back to or are born of this fact, and it will bear reiteration. Greedfall has a best ending. I'm not against best endings, but Spider's RPG structure and the things done to accommodate the existence of this ending have hurt Greedfall considerably. You may argue it's not the destination but the journey, but, you know, this destination changes the journey working backwards, turning the journey into a duller slog whether you're headed there or not. To get the best ending, you need to have every faction at their best possible relation with you, bar one you have no control over, which means resolving all of their side quest plotlines. Previous Spider's entries used faction reputation systems and karma, but made them take a backseat to big choice moments. Far from perfect, often contrived, silly, and still undercooked, but more fun to go through and much better for replayability. It makes all the morality stuff spice a journey you have much clearer and larger effects on, with better and worse outcomes but very few definitive bests, much less everyone being better off. To win, some had to lose. Greedfall cuts karma from the mix, leaving only faction relations, but these only come into play with decisive status checks nearing the final stretch, with actual choice moments being incredibly minor, getting at best a handful of acknowledgements and callbacks. If you change the signs by a railway, that doesn't change where the tracks go. Greedfall, in deciding to have a best ending, curtails the variety of choices that you can make, kneecaps their possible impact, and the method to achieve the best ending doubles its length. And regardless of anything, it all culminates with a choice that's so black and white, good and evil, that I'm thrown by how absurd it is. If you've done the side quests, to pick evil at the ending is to decide to spunk away 20 hours of busy work. I will say the side quest content is of comparable quality to the main path, but don't mistake that for a compliment, more an indictment of how lacking I find Greedfall to be. From a certain angle, the best ending means that the side content is just main extra quest, turning a 20-hour game that already feels hours too long into a glacial 40-hour monster. The fact is, all but one side quest arc is handed off to you in the course of the plot, a little bit of, oh, and while you're here, handed to you while you head for the door. This leaves even less incentive than we already lacked to go exploring. I explored a lot, and all I turned up was some skill totems and I lit a bunch of fires. I found 2 quests in the process of doing this. My second run, my mess everything up run, saw me cut the game in half by only doing 2 side quests. One to get this mask, and another because my arm was twisted by the story. This run was filled with slow realizations that were mostly me realizing, hang on, certain scenes aren't playing, and being surprised by them not being there. In doing only the main quest, you cull a majority of interactions with the other 2 colonial powers, rendering them little more than set dressing. Speaking relatively, of course, the side content has some of the biggest reveals and strongest emotional beats, while a lot of the main quest repeatedly drags its feet, and the arcs of all the factional side quests exist to reiterate the problems we were shown in the prologue back in Old Serene, not to develop, modify, or put spins on them, but to just redo them in slow motion, perhaps giving us a closer look at least. Every faction is a one-note problem that just keeps repeating the same problem until it stops. And each of these quests dance around key figures of each nation. You never see the perspective of citizens or people who don't hold a ton of sway, which halts every faction from ever affecting depth or believability. So it feels like in doing all of this, I'm changing the lives of about 5 people. Yet this is still more interesting than the bloody main quest. So I realized how hard tying gameplay and story together is for Greedfall due to the repetitive nature of both. So I'm going to put a big plot catch-up on the other side of the room for now. I instead want to talk about a video Mr. B-Tongue made a few years back about his hopes for the yet-to-be-released Mass Effect Andromeda. At the time he made the video, the story as we knew it was that the old alien races, having made it to the Andromeda galaxy, were cut off from their old governments and were now totally left to their own devices. Everyone has to lay down new rules for themselves. They need to deal with the races of Andromeda, who in turn have to deal with them. Now that's a simple summary, but there is a ton of possibility in that. Loads of moral and political choices. However, B-Tongue was worried, because there were also rumblings of an ancient evil in the galaxy. And the worry was that this ancient evil would override the more interesting possibilities of the seemingly more mundane plot. With what I just said, I think you already know where both I and the game are going. I am interested in the ancient evil, or in this case, the Malachor, but I am not interested in the mechanics of curing it as much as I am the conflicts the Malachor could present for those trying to cure it. Naturally, the story is going to focus on the mechanics of curing it, with political maneuvering and morality plays not even really taking a backseat, but sat back at home waiting on a taxi to turn up. I'm now going to walk you through one quest beat by beat. It will take ages, but hey, that's part of the problem. It concerns a dispute between the village of Vig Yigador, its chief Dunkus, an old man, and a congregation logging camp. After some natives were denied entry to a glade to replant the felled trees, several loggers working there died due to poisoning. First, we talk to an elder who explains the situation. He sends us to the logging camp where we find some of the planters and loggers in a tense standoff. With neither side standing down, Fradee offers to examine the deceased. Several feet away is a doctor. It may be disease, not poisoning. So by Fradee using his X-ray vision on all 3 of the covered corpses, he determines that it was indeed poison. We need not memorize anything he says here. Luckily, several feet away is the doctor, so we talk to her again. Yep, poison. After asking a couple of questions, it doesn't matter which, we're told of some hunters on the edge of the woods. We kill a trash mob and they deny poisoning the loggers. Luckily, I'm wearing a cape, so I can convince them to spill. The old man gave them tainted meat to trade with the camp. The intent, as far as they knew, wasn't to kill. Well, we're out of our depth, so we're going to have to head back to New Serene. We'll need Corcillion's guidance. On the way through, I run into a cutscene with Constantine.
Happy to see you, my dear. You really don't look well.
Yeah, Connie, I'm already sick of this too. God, I can only wonder what he's coming down with. Going to Corcillion requires running through the entire palace. This is what that looks like. Fun fact, every manor, every office, and every tavern the island over, and back on Old Serene, are exactly the same. Not to mention every tavern the island over connects to the same fighting pit. Man, I felt the island was small, but this is ridiculous. A lot of quests concerning governors, and a lot of quests concern governors, will see you making repeat trips into and out of the manor. But this is worse. We're here for Corcillion.
Can your old professor still prove himself useful?
Yeah, install a lift. Corsilion advises us to go get the deed agreements put down between the congregation and Duncus, so we go to a highlighted key to access the highlighted documents in a low-light basement. We're not keyed into trade deals like this, so let's head to Lady Morange's house. Turns out the natives lack a formal written language, or even really the concept of owning land, so we bollocked them pretty heavily on a few deals. Morange must have had a big change of heart along the way, because she's only happy for Fradee to set this right. It's lucky for us, I suppose, but then again, this sort of narrative convenience will turn out to be dime a dozen. What isn't is this bit of mechanical convenience. We're warped right back to Corsilion. Greedfall is very, very inconsistent about warping you between people when there's no challenge in getting from one to the other, except for time. So I appreciate it when it rears its head. Morange has had the brilliant realization that if they let the natives replant trees, we can cut down more trees. Now this sounds silly and obvious, but there are reasons it might actually be a stunning intellectual moment for the people of the congregation, which should hopefully click for you watching later. It is diegetic stupidity that we're only now just realizing this. Corsilion says he'll draft a more fair deed if the natives hand over the killer. So, time to travel back up north to meet with Duncus. The old guy basically serves himself up on a platter.
By killing these men, you have brought upon us their wrath. And it is only natural that they should ask for justice.
Duncus wound up being my guy. He's chill. Despite this, he's about to do something very annoying. We're about halfway there, folks. Duncus wants us to go and shut down a mine we're operating. It risks collapsing a mountain, which could potentially kill thousands. Also, the owner has been imprisoning and using natives as slaves in secret. Well, Vasco, we did it. Clearly, we're a model congregation citizen because we're always so bloody busy. We're not allowed in the mine, so we scale a nearby hillock, and by seeing some shady shit, it's time to go and see Corsilion again. And I hope by now you realize why I'm of two minds about the abundance of quick travel points. I'll bitch about them, but I'd be dead without. So the mines were sold to a bloke called Maillard, and Corsilion believes it was meant to be shuttered. He can't remember, so hey, back to the basement.
Fradee, my young student, what can I do for you?
I'll settle for a dumbwaiter, just install something. Fradee isn't one for legal jargon, but guess what? Morange is, so congratulations, Greedfall, you've made me do a side quest where I have to go in a fucking lap. Morange points us to Maillard, who hangs out at the docks. His attempt to bribe Fradee fails, so he just brushes off our accusations and leaves. Naturally, it's time to go ask Corsilion what all of this could mean. And guess what? We haven't beat our feet enough, so the game thinks we're not worth warping back.
Can your old professor still prove himself useful?
Yeah, open your window. I'm just gonna stand outside and fucking shout up from now on. So the mining camp is being operated illegally, and with him enslaving natives, we got permission to go kick shit out of them. Free the natives, and after that, Duncus is ready to hand over the killer, and that's where this quest ends. So, to reiterate with respect for your time this time, Elder Guards, Doctor, Corpse, Doctor, Hunter, Corsilion, Key, Paper, Morange, Corsilion, Duncus, Minecliff, Corsilion, Paper, Morange, Moyard, Corsilion, Camp Slaves, Duncus. That may sound a meaty side quest until I tell you that the bulk of my interaction with it was holding down A to sprint between NPCs and pressing A to hear dialogue. I take my finger off A to tap A. I sit and listen, finger at the ready to press and hold A once more, many, many times. I'm not making choices because doing this is not a choice. I make a grand total of one skill check, which avoids a fight or reputation loss or possibly nothing. I have 2 mandatory battles, one against creatures that, as stated, I've been killing by the hundreds. This is not meaningful gameplay. This is minutes at a time running through the exact same environments repeatedly. The only thing being tested is my patience. While this quest is admittedly egregious, this sort of structure is common across the board for both side and main content. It spreads conversation and details out between many NPCs while spreading interaction paper thin. It could be argued it makes proceedings a bit more sensible. No one person will have all the details, so Fradee is going between everyone. But due to these quests being totally linear, with no way to intuit past and fuss skip steps, it leads to absolutely dire pacing where information all seems muddled and unimportant. The abundance of NPCs dilutes how valuable every individual interaction seems. So much of this game could be crammed together, and all it would halve is the time, not the detail. For instance, in this quest, we could just merge everything about the Doctor and the corpses into one dialogue, where she tells Fradee they were poisoned. He asks to check, fade to black, Fade back into Fradee agreeing with her diagnosis. Bang, sorted, we lose nothing. Just have Corsillion hand us the documents and perhaps understand them rather than us running to the basement twice. Cut Maillard from the docks. Just pop him and his bribe attempt at the camp entrance. I'm sure much more could be done. Just cram more information into less NPCs. It makes the information more memorable, more important, and gets the player to the part where they get to do things faster. When I said the quests in the prologue were the best, I hope now you're getting an image as to why. With only one map to work with, it just didn't have the space to do things like this to you to the same extent, and that restraint wound up to its benefit. Now, you may still think this was just a bad one of the bunch. I mean, after all you were doing was following a dotted line. This is an RPG. Tell us about making choices. Okay, let's talk talents. I have so many issues with the talent system, and I lack a singular unifying point, so this will just be a laundry list of grievances. Now, this system is the same one from Technomancer, and I don't think I fully grasped it back then, and I suspect Spiders didn't either. Now we've both arrived at an understanding with it. But to recap what it is, it's fairly simple. It's one of your free upgrade screens. Skills grant new combat moves and minor stat boosts. Attributes determine what you can equip and grant minor stat boosts. And talents unlock contextual options and grant minor stat boosts. There are 6 talents with 3 tiers each. You get a point to put into one tier every several levels. Through level ups alone, you are quite limited in the number you get. There are, however, workarounds to supplement your natural talents. These existed in Technomancer as well, but were harder to come by. In all but Charisma, these checks are binary. If you have the required tier, you may pass. If not, you are incapable.
I can't do that.
Charisma, meanwhile, is a dice roll with higher tiers granting better odds. They sit in a middle ground between a choice and a skill check, but wind up with the benefits of neither. Now, this sounds simple, but it does lead to a question, which is how do you handle failure if not an outright inability to succeed? The talent system is a limited and binary affair, stymied in how it can be applied, and I think in Technomancer, Spiders either weren't aware or just didn't mind how strict it was. There were some scenarios you would outright fail, but seeing as a best ending was not a concern, sod it. All it did was create scenarios you would muck up because you didn't have the foresight to be a bloody Renaissance man. But scenarios were written with this failure in mind, and since the ending is more down to big choices rather than success in all areas, I can move on. It's poor design, but amusingly so, which is enough for me to overlook a lot of things. I'll take the piss, but I won't really begrudge it. So Spiders realizes that with a best ending, this system is unbelievably punitive. You would suffer for the choices you made in character creation hours beforehand. If every talent was to be valuable in spite of a player's inability to have every talent, then we hit an impasse, since it would make a best ending totally arbitrary, if not downright impossible. Now, I don't believe it's impossible to make the talent system as it is right now engaging and consequential yet fair. After all, it's just a different take on the skill check, and we've had skill checks and dice rolls in RPGs for decades. This is the way shit was when RPGs came in books and people liked it then and they like it now. The thing is, making the talent system work requires budget, imagination, considered quest design, and more tools at the player's disposal than they have. Spiders was lacking in more than one of these things. Instead, the solution was to try and sidestep their own system as much as humanly possible. The reason why that last quest was just hearing people talk at us with only one talent check, well, yes, it was because it was awfully written, but it's because the failure states Spiders have to use against the player are not very good, and they want to contend with them as little as possible. The talent system is a big, illusory waste of time that mostly serves to save time. Yes, I know what I just said. There is an adage in game mastering. It's hobbyist advice from another medium, but it does apply to quest design. If you don't have a consequence, don't ask for a roll. If there are no possible stakes for failure present in a scene, don't waste a player's time with false challenge. Allow them to proceed so you can move the story to where stakes actually exist. And this brings me to the fact that I haven't actually answered the question of what talents are doing. What are you checking against to avoid? You can probably see it coming, but the answer is nothing. Late in the game, we need to investigate a person's shadier affairs. We can threaten the guard, or roll some dice to sway him with charisma. If you sway him, he tells you of this person's hours locked away in their office and hands you a key. If you threaten him, he tells you of this person's hours locked away in their office and the key was so scared it jumped upstairs and we must go fetch it. I mentioned a player's limited toolset. Our methods of interaction are stealth, combat, talking, and contextual button presses. We are in our own palace in New Serene, so we can't lose faction status, can't incur a battle, there's no need to sneak around. The only consequence is that we have to head up and down a flight of stairs. I don't share feeling with Sarde's legs, but unlike him I do age, so that's a trade-off. The thing is, this category of punishment for failure is disgustingly commonplace even outside of New Serene. Bloke on the docks doesn't want us investigating a suspicious chest. Well, I can make a charisma check to have him open it, or I can walk several meters away to where the key is sat on a box, with an orange glow highlighting it. If I have lockpicking, I can just go straight for the crate, which saves minutes of my life to be wasted elsewhere. At some point, the animals are sick of my shit and are sacking the cities, throwing themselves at the gates in a relentless tide, or so they say. I only see a few of them. I am between 35 to 40 hours deep into Greedfall when this example is taking place. I need to find a missing scouting party outside of the city walls, and to find them, I need to talk to a commander. But she yells that her fort needs supplies. She won't tell me where the scouts went unless I go and get them. Governor Burhan is 5 minutes of sprinting away, back the way I came. Not that that turns out to be the objective, but what I assumed I would be doing. A charisma check to skip this bonus objective pops up, and I think to myself that if this fails, I'm just going to quit the game there and then. I paid full price for Greedfall, yet I am so bored of it that I am using my illusory skill system in the hopes of skipping playing it. This is what talent checks are. They are shortcuts. They do not modify content or give you an edge. They are tokens handed to you to skip gameplay. And that is if they do anything at all. A native guard won't let me into the home of the Teer Conductus. She is a lead in finding the cure for the Malachor. Once again, trick, charisma, or a context option that I would have had no matter what? Well, 2 succeed, 1 kicks you back so you can pick one of the other 2, none of them alter proceedings. I don't suffer reputation loss, but 1 has a chance of non-existent failure on a dice roll. Due to the binary nature of the system, lockpicking, vigor, and science talents can never be vital. And to make sure a player is never lost, every instance of a locked door led me to the key beforehand. Gaps to be jumped and walls to be destroyed, acting as nothing more than small shortcuts, since if the player lacks the talent, they would be left stuck with no way for us to continue but to grind, or start furiously knitting prayer beads so they can believe they'll make the jump. Out in the wild are locked chests, or unlocked chests locked by the need to jump something. However, since skills and attributes are what determine weapon viability and not the talents needed to access them, these chests can't have their loot tailored for anyone. They mostly contain a middling mix of restoratives, ingredients, and a halfway decent weapon that was always weaker than what I was using at the time. There's never any reason to upgrade any of these stats to level 3. Each companion, when they hit max relation with you, grants a boost to one of the 6 talents. All capes grant +1 to charisma, meaning there is never a reason not to wear them. I never took this hat off since no amount of head armor was as valuable as +1 intuition. At level 1 crafting, you can affix a talent booster for science, vigor, or lockpicking to torso armor, so I ran about with a full wardrobe. Not to mention the game starts you with goldsmith gloves that grant you +1 to crafting. We can also use one of the limited memory shards to reset and refund all of our skill points. I did at one point use a shard to beat a talent check since I had several spare and couldn't be asked to go and get the point another way. I never chose my companions based on who I liked or disliked, but since companions, when speaking to their own faction, can act as your charisma check with no chance of failure. Most quests will concern 1 or 2 factions. You have a party of 2 companions. It's hardly a brainbuster. Roll up, see what faction it is, swap your party around, especially easy since I can often back out of a conversation to go and fetch them when I see the check pop up, and come back. Sometimes having the correct companion will cause them to jump in automatically to smooth out arguments and do your job for you. In a vacuum, I do actually like this feature. It gives the companions some degree of agency. It's an earnest way of rewarding the player for approaching situations diplomatically. However, my investment in charisma starts feeling a little bit hollow. Why did I waste a point here when I can bypass the issue I spent this point for? Now, companions won't always come to bat for you, and then we go back to the issue of possible failure. Last and perhaps least is that Greedfall is inconsistent in what talents cover. One side quest sees us investigating a rash of murders at an Ordo-Luminous camp deep in the swamps. We go and find the bodies.
This man's skull is sunken, but he doesn't look like he was in a fight. Could he have fallen?
That is unlikely. Look, my child. The wound is located at the back of the skull. I regret to say that in my opinion, he was struck from behind. With a mace, most likely.
And can have our companions investigate them. Or if we have the science stat ourselves, we can say exactly what they just said.
This man's death was no accident, nor was it linked to any predator attack. It was caused by a violent strike to the back of the skull with a mace.
But we said it. Later on, we're investigating another corpse, and suddenly the art of autopsy is based on intuition. Should we lack it, we have to go and collect Afra. Afra is our science-based companion. She is a scientist, so that she can come along and intuit what happened for us. Let me reiterate like a prick. The companion who is a scientist, who boosts science, who we haven't met yet in this video, but I'm ignoring that, since if Greedfall doesn't care about consistency, neither will I. Intuition is also used in conversation, making it a charisma check that's binary. You could argue that charisma is swaying people with a silver tongue, while intuition is argumentation. But Greedfall never draws that distinction itself, instead being fairly arbitrary. This does relate back to what I talked about earlier. The quest design is linear. I can only recall one branching scenario where by doing a bonus objective I could bypass a charisma check. There's no doors to unlock or walls to destroy that allow us to circumvent or bypass a scenario. There are never two conflicting charisma checks that make you question what the better choice actually is, or, you know, roleplay. The right choices are signposted by the fact they have a talent or context check affixed to them. You never need think. And this all does come back to another reason why I'm against a best ending being here. Spider's design is antithetical to a best ending. It strains under the weight of having one. Spiders has had to water down their already simplistic mechanics to make it doable. It also kills the illusion of choice in choices. I mentioned the minor nature of actual choice moments. I cannot begin to explain how few and far between consequences are, and that the biggest of these consequences doesn't come about by way of choices, but by inaction. By unwillingness to put in another 20 hours, to put on a different suit or run back to a camp to equip the right companion and to pass all of those skill checks.
My eyes have clouded. I see no more.
In every single which way, the talent system demonstrates a clear lack of, well, talent. Now I know, don't worry, I've noticed, there's something that's been bugging everyone for a while. Snake, why didn't you mention the giant creature that attacked us in the prologue? Well, the truth is it slipped my mind. There's no real right or wrong place to talk about combat, so we'll just cap off mechanics with it. It's the gameplay you engage with most, but is the least noteworthy. The game separates combat into 3 branches. You can mix and merge any way you want. These branches are in theory balanced by effective damage versus resource management and range. So, to bore you with the details, Warrior is medium damage, minimal resource management, but with only melee options. Mage is low damage, medium resource management with a mix of melee and ranged attacks. Technical is high damage, pure resource management with only ranged tools. Since the game can't have you not holding a weapon, and since guns are considered an inventory ability, the technical class will start with gun and blade proficiencies. Even using a memory shard, you need to take one of the 3 classes. Now, while this is all true of the combat, it's not the important part. The classes are actually a question of how much gameplay you want, and it's the real difficulty select. Picking Warrior is saying you want to play a video game. You want to engage with janky mechanics and creatures with god-awful attacks with awkward wind-ups that do a ton of damage, but hey, fighting humans has some decent ebb and flow to it. Random crits have been replaced with a fury mechanic. Landing blows builds fury, which can be spent on highly damaging, unavoidable blows. Fury can also be spent on a couple of abilities, like getting so mad you materialize a bomb. Blocking and dodging are now both standard melee abilities, with block timing leading to either a parry or a clash. Mage is saying you want less of a game, but you want to spend way longer playing it. The bosses turn into 10-minute plus affairs of button mashing and potion quaffing. Now you actually need to manage mana, and I can't lie, it's not really a bother. I joked in previous Spiders entries that money turning into health kinda broke the consumable economy, but with the widespread availability of everything on the island, the omnipresence of merchants, and the lack of anything else I need to spend much money on, I was lugging hundreds of health and magic potions around before too long. But once I hit this boss and I saw the damage I was doing, I decided I'll pop a memory shard and take up arms. Picking technical is saying you'll bind your gun to a key, put aside a couple of minutes every now and again to procure more bullets, and just murder everything in your path. This is pure resource management, but like potions, I could sort out a regiment of redcoats and still have munitions to spare. This class overrides whatever difficulty you selected and sets the game too easy, but it must have been a glitch or something because I still got the achievement for beating the game on extreme. This is the same fight a playthrough apart. Despite being 5 levels stronger, having the best sword in the game, and being on a lower difficulty. On the second run, I had a gun, and that was the real difference maker. The damage has been increased across the board, leading to random encounters not being whittling competitions. There are new mechanics like quick weapon switching, armor damage, balance. Old considerations like spacing, knockdown, positioning, and dodging remain, but if you wish to ignore all of these additions and refinements and modifications, just pick up a gun and shoot everything. I respect that. I put out a video demonstrating stealth and simply put, were available, more than a little bit busted. But what's more interesting is how broken aggro ranges are. Perhaps in an attempt to stop kiting, enemies are glued to their zone. If you exit their range, even if you're knocked out of it for a nanosecond, they'll instantly recover all of their health and turn to sprint back to starting position. This doesn't quite work out for them. While they regain numbers, they don't regain numbers. So doing hit and runs on singular enemies before beating a retreat is very easy. As is leaving a fight should you find it to be going poorly. They'll let you go. It's like the talent system, absurdly exploitable. Unlike the talent system, this was probably an accident. So let's sort of return to the story. It's time to talk about companions. As we know, we're still missing one, but thankfully they are the dullest, so I'm not going to be too upset about it. Greedfall plays host to one of the most forgettable parties I've ever led, even as they work very hard to make sure you don't forget them.
Bit of poison on my blade. Bit of poison on my blade. And let's go! To ward off this fate.
Now, despite this, they should each be proud, because they get to represent a shortcoming with the writing. This is more in missed opportunities or the game failing to live up to what it appears to promise. So Vasco joined us as we arrived on New Serene. A naught from an early age and a promising captain, his crew and superiors both speak of the man as a prodigy, someone born to command a crew. Him and Fradee have a lot in common. Both are extraordinary individuals who have earned stations far grander than typical for their age. But unlike Fradee, political maneuvering has set Vasco back, and he has his ship and crew taken. He's now stuck on Teer Fradee, perhaps indefinitely. It's not hard to put together that Fradee is of native birth, but we learn it for a fact fairly early on in the story, leading to 2 scenes of isolated minor upset. We were transported from Teer Fradee to Kakan on a Naut ship, taken from our native mother and brought into the Fradee household. Meanwhile, Vasco is of congregation birth but was given over to the Nauts. Vasco and Fradee have fascinating parallels that nonetheless have led to very different lives. Fradee and Vasco should have so much to say to each other. Hell, the game should have so much to say with this cast. Both the people they were born as and the people they have become. The offices they hold or should hold. Vasco should be envious that Fradee is unlikely to ever suffer a similar setback, or put any effort whatsoever into taking back his own ship, for which he shows no motivation whatsoever 2 scenes after joining you. The companions only truly exist and act within their own tiny spaces, starting and ending their development in their own diminutive quest lines, which means every potential point of familiarity or friction between the companion and Fradee, or the companion and the party at large, can never be acted upon and never will be, nor even be brought up. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure the parallels between Fradee and Vasco are pure coincidence for how much the game leverages those similarities for any discussion. Siora has this as well. She's got an incredibly respected mother, her sister holds far more political power than her, but she's the one out in the world acting as emissary for her people. She is a young person who is expected to fill very big shoes. These three characters are all young people with great expectations placed on their shoulders, but are from very different cultures. Not to mention, Siora is working with Petrus, who is from Thélème, also known as the people kidnapping and brainwashing her people in droves. The team is later joined by Afra, who is from the Bridge, also known as the people who are kidnapping and mutilating her people in droves. But they never butt heads over anything outside of some contextual back and forth insults flung to no effect. Technomancer had the drama between, and I'm stabbing at names here, Amelia and Scott, over a dead son and a dead dad. It nearly resulted in one of them shooting the other dead, but you could intervene. Now, no one debates, no one sways another. All companions have drama that is isolated to its own bubble and doesn't interact with anyone else. So with everything I've just said, Vasco's companion quests actually see him trying to track down and meet his biological brother. It takes a bit, and when we find him, the man turns out to be a bumbling idiot. Vasco sees him and decides, yeah, he's happy he's a naught. They're his real family. Sure, okay. You seem so excited to be back amongst them with the fact you're not going anywhere. I mean, this is also cut and dry. It's far too clean, far too boring, yet it all leaves a really bad taste in my mouth. It gives neither Vasco or Fradee anything to do as actual characters. It says nothing new about the Naughts or the congregation that wasn't said in the prologue. Vasco just winds up the man who happily got fucked over from both sides. Now, Petrus, our native-nicking, smooth-voiced theologian. His quest represents many of the same problems, but on a far grander scale, and it doesn't really think anything through. Now, I promise not to get political on you, but this game is severely lacking in politics. It's that damn straight-jacketed quest design which leads to it, but it also means that Fradee is mandated by the plotted line to do really, really stupid things, because if you don't do them, you can't fully complete the game. Petrus comes to us with an intriguing yet treasonous offer. He feels that Constantine isn't a seasoned enough politician to handle Mother Cardinal Cornelia, the governess of San Mateus, so he offers to give Constantine a political edge. The best one around. Blackmail. And as we no doubt love our rambunctious, plague-stricken quest giver, we're going to go way, way above our station and meddle in the secret affairs of a major political figure in a country that we try and maintain neutrality with. The quest begins innocently enough with us personally pilfering Cornelia's private chambers and rifling through her letters. Now, in an RPG sense, I would consider this an evil action. Greedfall doesn't really have codified good and evil, and by good and evil I mean moral alignments, such as Paragon versus Renegade, Light versus Dark, Law versus Chaos, and so on. Greedfall doesn't have that kind of moral binary, obviously, since I didn't choose to do this. This action I would not have undertaken had I been given an alternative, unless that alternative was somehow way worse. This is not how I would have handled the situation. This is how I doubt Fradee would have handled the situation. But it's part and parcel of the quest, so let's get back to business. We find a note speaking of weird stains on the basement floor, and through a series of actions that should lead to us getting sacked, shipped back to the continent, and slipped in the oubliette, we discover that Cornelia takes out loans to host secret parties for those close to her politically. Parties lush with alcohol and prostitutes. Now, I have no idea how conservative Thélème is regarding sex and alcohol, since the entirety of their faith seems to be based around killing those who don't share it. And as such, I have no idea how much any of this news should hurt. And besides anything else, while we're gleaning all of this, Fradee isn't exactly incognito.
Or you'll soon run into trouble. Legate or no legate.
Not that anonymity ultimately matters. We stand before Cornelia with Petrus while he rubs what we learned in her face. Because this wasn't about us whatsoever.
All of this just to make me spill the beans, am I right?
And the way he went about it was unbelievably short-sighted on Petrus's behalf.
Have you forgotten the abyss into which you plunged because of your ambition last time?
Petrus, what is she talking about?
Cornelia, you don't have the right to use that against me, to disclose what I revealed to you that day.
What the fuck did you expect to happen? You brought me here, the person you didn't want learning any of this. So Petrus knew our native mother back in the day. Feels guilty about her passing. Yeah, another spoiler, but there were secret expeditions here before the big settlements arose. I mean, that shouldn't be a surprise. We didn't roll up and plop cities down the instant we made landfall. So now there is a tiny bit of friction between Fradee and Petrus over our mother. Naturally, it's isolated into a couple of scenes. It turns out that Fradee was conceived at the shore of Tall Bones, and really, weren't we all? But, more importantly, are we going to face any blowback? Now, our job as legate is never explicitly laid out, but from what I've understood, my actions seem abhorrent, if not downright contradictory to what that role is. Well, we get a light chiding from Cornelia, and that's because, and stick with me here because the words I'm about to say will sound strange, getting that dirt on Cornelia wasn't something that actually happened. Or it happened, but it doesn't matter. It was merely a narrative tool to be used and disposed of on the way to the actual story, which is about our mother. All it took getting to that plot was thoroughly breaking my suspension of disbelief. I can't really reconcile Fradee acting that stupid against the slim pickings of a character I was presented with, nor can I forgive the events, rationale, or outcome of this quest against how people even remotely act.
Politics is an extremely subtle game.
Perhaps Greedfall does have a binary morality, but it's competence versus incompetence. It's just that we're often railroaded to be incompetent anyway. One more quest, and an example to wholly round out the point I'm building towards. We're investigating reports of a demonic cult in the native village of Vedlug. Standing outside the village is Sister Ephesia, who by now the natives refuse to even speak to, so Fradee's talents but not his talents are needed to get to the heart of the matter. Now, all of the natives say that Ephesia came into the village with her mind made up as to what the truth is with no way to convince her otherwise, so what's the point in even talking to her?
Questions have no value when one already claims to know the answers.
Now, I can't argue with that, but Fradee is mandated by plot to do so.
Answer your own questions. At least then the answers will please you, and we shall be done with your foolishness.
This guy could afford to be less of a dick, but I can't fault him for it. By this point in the story, we know that TehSnakerer hates any religion that isn't theirs, so this should be a boy who cried wolf scenario. But wolves don't exist in this world, and as such can't be part of any folk wisdom. I understand we need to undertake the investigation, but we have to do it agreeing with Ephesia's perspective and enforcing it. We can't use dialogue to skew it, to force it through, or we can't leave town and lie to Ephesia, who we have been told to check in with regularly. We find a suspicious guy, he has some weird crap in his house, so we decide to tail him that night, which, Ephesia tried and failed to do so? Anyway, we follow him. If you kill him... no worries, you'll just know where to go. After some light puzzling, we make it into a cave, and get this. Well, I wouldn't say that's demonic. Weird, certainly. But I'm sure Ephesia will see it both ways. We then go and have to talk to the Mal, Deirdre, chief of Vedlug, with Fradee lying that they assisted in the ritual, which is a stupid lie that would be outed before long if the game cared to do so. But we want to know how to converse with one of those spirits, and to get that out of Deirdre, we can, as per usual, sway her with words or threaten her with spilling what we saw to the Inquisitors. Naturally, both lead to the same outcome, but swaying skips a fight against semi-unique opponents, and either way we don't say a word to Ephesia. I need to go back to the Technomancer once more. I keep using it as a positive comparison, and I'm not really sure I ever saw myself doing that. I complained back then that Technomancer put all the factions in bubbles to never really interact. Greedfall is worse, and it's worse because it pretends even more that it isn't the case when it's actually more true than ever. Once the quest is complete, we leave town, and Sister Ephesia can't be interacted with, nor does she hail or halt us to ask questions that she would be very likely to have. Now let's not forget, when we last spoke with her yesterday, we were getting answers to her investigation that night. She knew what we were up to. She will now stand there silently. For how long I don't know, seeing as I would always quick travel into Vedlug and skip over her. Once again, Ephesia and her investigation was nothing more than a tool to be used and thrown away. What she really needed from us was unimportant. What was important was learning about a spirit down the road. Remember what I mentioned regarding the Beatung video? That the conflicts involved with finding a cure are more interesting than the cure itself? This quest is an awful consequence of the writing putting the cure over the conflict, but it wants to pretend it has conflict while giving it no weight, no substance, no faction actually touching another. And so this really clumsy, contrived setup has a giant hole in it the moment you remember that aphasia exists. You walk into the quest with one stated goal and leave it with a different one, because Greedfall has a check it can't cash. The threat was hollow, and so is aphasia. This is because Greedfall is a mealy-mouthed coward that can't follow through on any promise or threat it delivers, leaving a bunch of scattered contrivances in its wake. It forgets NPCs willy-nilly and hopes the player won't notice the massive series of reasonable consequences that it won't deliver on as it pulls you along a much more boring but far easier to write plot of mystic crap fixing a magical plague by talking to an all-knowing tree god. Spoilers. Each and every quest leaves me feeling that I've made the situation far messier, but Greedfall is ready to sweep everything that it doesn't like, that it caused, under the rug. So not only is the game totally linear, with Forks immediately rejoining the main path, not even diverting for longer than a couple of minutes, but even with what is an incredibly tight degree of narrative control, it can't even keep itself straight or consider consequences at all. In all of these instances, the player is led by the nose, unable to decide how they present themselves. The faction relations screen is just a 100% completion checklist disguised as something more dynamic, since it isn't decisions that affect anything but time investment. And it's a hefty one for the quality of content and capacity for role-playing on display. I'm going to reiterate something for the sake of emphasis. We are the legate of the merchant congregation in the New World. The prologue sets up Fradee as someone not only good at their job but wise beyond their years. They can go toe-to-toe with diplomats, far their senior, and run circles around them. In the New World, we have two warring factions and the natives, with our country sitting as a neutral ground between the three. We're encouraged to maintain that neutrality because a plague is killing everyone, save for the immune natives, and the Nauts as well, but never mind that. There are also two large private guilds, one military, one nautical. Both of them wield massive power and influence. Now, I'm salivating at the prospects of what a skilled, imaginative RPG writer can do with this foundation. There are so many possibilities for alliances, wars, pacts, intrigue, traitors, spies. Instead, there is no interaction and much less nuance. The game gets my hopes up, then works hard to tell me not to actually get too excited.
And on Teer, Fradee?
To my knowledge, no one has yet seen any serious fighting.
Every faction quest is a straight line, and the talent system is an awful middle ground between skill check and choice, which also tells you what the correct choice is, so you never need weigh up or think about a scenario. If you just follow the breadcrumbs, then eventually every single faction will love you. Greedfall doesn't have an illusion of choice, but an illusion of choice. On a micro and macro scale, Greedfall often has the building blocks for conflict, but it sneezes at anything that would be complicated and scatters them. For a moment, I'm going to self-indulge and imagine a Greedfall that wasn't 6 straight lines with one of them being the main plot, but a set of strings to intertwine and tug on, either to stir the pot or because we need to actually work and think to maintain that neutrality, if we even want to. Imagine a Greedfall where the months of distance from the mainland and new discoveries led to the governors acting with newfound freedom, whether because of vainglorious pursuits or a misguided belief that they are acting as their nation should. That neutrality we were sent off with is now an option, especially as Constantine's terminal illness develops and our need for a cure grows more urgent for his sake, pushing us to make hard choices and compromise that neutral standing to get what we need. In this alternate reality, let's pretend there are actual multiple routes to fixing the problem rather than the one. A Greedfall where our investigation of Cornelia could be done with actual subterfuge, where we got that blackmail and then decide what we do with it. We could tell Petrus to hold his tongue, go ahead and blab, or maybe go under his nose and warn Cornelia of Petrus's plans before they come to fruition, throwing our companion under the bus for political favor. A Greedfall where we could follow through on our threat of telling Aphasia and bringing down the Ordo Luminis on Deirdre for presenting a possible threat. Or one where we could actually negotiate with the village and then go and lie to Aphasia, sending Thélème on a wild goose chase, perhaps even bringing them down on a rival village. A Greedfall where once Vasco and the Naut quests are complete and Vasco's ship is unoccupied, Vasco comes and asks if you're okay with him returning to his duties, and you can either keep him around to keep a companion, or let him go to gain a powerful ally within the Naut. Technomancer did that with Phobos. That's an interesting way to get a better ending for the faction. I didn't know that at the time I was playing it, but if you give up Phobos, you get a better ending. That's fascinating. That's a cool decision. A quickly forgotten note about Constantine's backstory is that even his own father hated him. Sarde's upbringing is notable since their mother treated them with love and affection. Most noble households in the congregation are cold and pragmatic, and Constantine in particular had it bad. He's pretty sure he got the governorship of New Serene partly to be rid of him. Sade could be confronting the possibility of upsetting their own country in trying to save Constantine at the cost of a long-standing, hard-held neutrality because Sade, for how little character they have, does clearly care deeply for Constantine. What is so frustrating about Greedfall is not that it avoids being interesting, but that it sits at the very edge of being interesting while seemingly purposefully avoiding ever actually becoming so. Semi-related side note. The best thing about Greedfall is Hikmet's music. It captures the atmosphere and spirit of a better game. It's a track grand and sweeping, a track that more than anything else sells me on the idea that we are wandering a city of great learning and great progress, the magnificence and scope of which is daunting. But then the track slows down, displaying uncertainty in the midst of all this. Perhaps there's a cost being paid for all this progress. The track plays this way for a while, but more hopeful notes start slowly getting reintroduced, getting louder and louder, until it eventually drowns out that uncertainty, but it will resurface. Now that you know it's there, you can't forget it. A Greedfall where this conflict genuinely exists in all areas may preclude a best ending, and frankly I'd be fine with that. And an example of how this could be done exists in Greedfall. We've seen it. Those fucking prologue quests, yet again, they had choices, not demarcated by talent picks, but more hazy and uncertain. Back then, it seemed like my job as a player was going to be tackling the question of whether doing my job is appeasing the other nations or upholding the laws of my own in spite of others. Where did that tiny spark go? That was genuine decision making.
Politics. The curse of our society.
I suppose it was because, you know, it's an isolated area where those details can never resurface, and now it's been replaced with this, which means the prologue is priming the player for decisions they are not going to make. Now, there is a big glowing neon sign flaw in this flight of fancy. What do Ptolemy believe? Do they have any beliefs I could leverage? Why is the Coin Guard trusted enough to protect world leaders instead of state militaries? Could that trust be abused? Does the Bridge Alliance care for anything besides science? Do they have any art, sports, foods? Is there anything I can give to them to gain any favor? My ideal Greedfall can't function. I know my ideas ran away from what most companies could implement. But spiders especially, as their worlds are too flat to make choices like this meaningful. Not just, do I kill this nameless soldier I met for no reason? To make real choices, you need real information. You need signal to separate from noise. Perhaps most disappointingly, each of the faction quests ends so insultingly cleanly. The Ptolemy subjugating, beating, and converting the natives at the threat of death. Oh, that's just the Ordo Luminis. They were working this way without Cornelia's knowledge. It's fine. The moment she learns how bad it is, she strips them of their power. It was that easy. The Coin Guard quests are a never-ending parade of corruption. Higher-ups abusing the fact they're an absurdly powerful mercenary guild. They're using that power to coerce shopkeepers, run secret training camps where weak recruits die in droves, and commit more crimes than even Sade. But it's fine. All of the bad apples belong to a single conspiratorial alliance. The Bridge Alliance carrying out horrific human experiments on the natives, who have a mass grave putting their body count possibly in the hundreds, if not thousands. Oh, it was a rogue scientist given resources, autonomy, and little to no oversight. He even poisoned Constantine. And well, we're a native, so bottoms up, Sade. But it's fine. Suffice to say, Burhan knew nothing of the plot, so it's water under the bridge. Off with his head. Okay, I need to add this regarding Burhan.
Where is also a politician, with words covered in honey but as dangerous as my weapons.
No, Kurt, he's a muppet, an absolutely witless moron who would not know what was happening under his nose with a mirror to his face and tongs to his lips. Every single interaction with him in the bridge questline is Sade storming into the palace on the verge of an aneurysm. Just flabbergasted how without Burhan knowing, powerful figures in the bridge have attempted to kill Sade several times.
Lord de Sade, what? Enough with the formalities, Excellency. You owe me an explanation. Did you order your troops to attack while I was negotiating under a white flag?
I assure you that I have no idea what you are talking about.
Burhan ironically doing the assassin's job far better through sheer power of frustrating obliviousness. Burhan is hands down the dumbest leader going, and I'm sad we have no power to use that fact. That's the kind of information I'm talking about. So, no actual character ever winds up with any dirt on them. It always winds up being an autonomous third party working in secret and easily shrugged off. Fuck off with that! Let one of these people have any amount of grit or dirt to them. We know from the intro that these factions are actually bastards. Don't use the same reveal every bloody time to shake that off. At least Technomancer had the follow-through to make the Vori shitheads. At least in Technomancer, getting one faction to like you could come at the cost of another. Even fucking Mars had the balls to end with Roy unsure if he had done right. Not totally content that his survival may have made the situation murkier. And you know what? I didn't really talk about Petrus, did I? I used him like Greedfall used Aphasia, a vehicle to get where I really wanted. Obviously, there is another issue of everything I've just said. It's just one perspective on how Greedfall is plotted. I'm going to step back and explain what the main plot is versus what the side quests are. Siora and Kurt represent the pacing of Greedfall and how consequences are not born of choice, but inaction. Side content is not main content plus, it's time-sensitive main content. Do it as soon as you can, since you stand to lose these two. What is amusing about Siora is that if we follow her side quest, go and collect her mother's body, she then just lets the body sit for ages until quite late in the game. At some arbitrary point, she decides it's time to bury her.
It is on this stone altar that we will place the body of my mother. We must place a censer where her head will be, and another near her feet. And then you will have done everything you could to help me. Do you understand? There. Everything is in place.
I feel sort of condescended towards, but you know what? That is questing. If you let her mother's body sit, something she can hardly judge you on, she'll eventually decide it's time to go and get it herself. It's not the fact I've been killing natives in droves in this run. It's my lack of urgency about the one that's already dead. The main quest of Greedfall is a race against time to find a cure for Constantine, uncover the source of the Malachor, and reverse it. Naturally, Constantine is dying at the speed of plot, but as a story must, it treats it with urgency for the sake of tension. Constantine comes across as though he will keel over any day now. His sickness is crippling, painful. He worries that his ability to reason will die from the agony before his body follows, and it's the best performance in a game with some really bad ones.
I know the captain of that outpost. A pessimistic man who would never order an attack without being absolutely certain of total victory without losses. My beloved.
Wait, I romanced her? The side content, meanwhile, of fixing the underlying problems of each faction, that takes time away from saving Constantine. This is where the clock is actually ticking. All of my complaints made so far have been ignoring the apparent urgency presented by Constantine's sickness. But funnily enough, it's this side of the game where you're punished for putting things off. You will fail quests and you will lose companions. And Kurt, well, he's an odd one. You'll want to get his side quests out of the way lickety-split. This happened shortly after learning of our native heritage.
I am sorry. I promise you that I knew nothing of it. And as far as I'm concerned, this changes nothing. I will keep watching over you.
Yeah, cheers, Kurt.
Kurt, what's going on? Is there something wrong?
Coin guards! The time has come.
But what is this?
Ready arms.
Kurt, what are you doing?
Aim!
Stop that, soldiers! Lower your weapons now!
Sorry, Greenblood.
Fight with honor.
On guard. I said draw!
Sadly, Kurt never learned. I never, ever fight with honor.
Our commander figured out that we could easily take control of this island. You rely so heavily on our protection. You are so dependent. So naive.
Imagine if Trump's bodyguard shot him in the back of the head and said, "I'm president now." That's what this plan is, you daft fuck. You take over the island and then what? Oh shit, we're not making money. We killed our clients. Now that's optional. Sadly, that is the best pre-boss fight cutscene in Greedfall. If you've done his quests, he comes running to warn you of the incoming Coin Guard Coup, and fights alongside us to stop it. The Coin Guard Coup is one of the more absurdly constructed set pieces in the story.
What else was there to expect from employing coin-fed mercenaries?
Has the penny finally dropped for you there, Fradee? That this was always a bit off? Now, it's innocent enough on first blush, a big upheaval in the plot, but the underlying mechanics are strange and contradictory. After moving the sickly Constantine and some staff to a basement, we head out into the pretty peaceful streets of New Serene to save Morange. Then we're urged to capture the head conspirator, Commander Torsten, before he escapes. We're given side objectives to capture 3 major co-conspirators and send emissaries to Hikmet and San Mateus to warn them. In my first run, despite the urgency presented in the situation, I did all of those secondary objectives first, incapacitating Torsten's allies and sending word to the other 2 cities of the plot. Despite my companion's warnings of the sound of battle alerting Torsten to flee and that we should take a different route, I fought my way in through the fiercely defended front door, cutting my way to his office to learn that should his plot fail, he has an escape planned on a Naut ship. Luckily, we happen upon him outside, out the door I came in from, about to flee. But seeing we caught up with him somehow, he decides to stand and fight.
Oh, come here, you pathetic dog!
The game is over for you, Commander. They're going to have to pay for their crimes.
I cannot remember if the traitors are hung before being quartered or if it is the contrary.
Now, while I was intending to mess things up on my second run, stress testing failure and so on, Greedfall hardly needed my help on this one. I made a dead sprint for Torsten. Ignoring his allies or sending help, I dodged the front door and used the scaffolding to enter via the side. It took one scuffle to enter his office and find out about his escape plan. So I run out the front door, excuse us lads, and I make a beeline for the docks, just in time to see his ship breaching the horizon. And one of our companions figures this.
You will need to make a choice between the 2.
With no time left somehow, we must choose which one of the 2 cities we will go and save personally. That weird reverse urgency rears its head again. This is such a hard choice. I mean, I hate them both. I ultimately sacrificed TehSnakerer, and now we need to go and save Hikmet. I kept this talent check in my back pocket since it boggles the mind. I love it. Outside the palace is a confused handmaid. We explain the situation and our need to enter the palace. We need a charisma check for the key, and I fail it. So she says she doesn't trust us and can't open the door to let us in, instead informing us of a secret entrance which doesn't need a key. Well, that's a bright spark from someone who's not a bright spark. My mood plummets soon after that since the fight to save Burhan is the hardest in the game. Unlike some of these encounters, Burhan is not invincible. He is weak, his death is a game over, and he is very aggressive. And there's a man in here who can one-shot me. So I have to put the effort in to save these fuckers, and it takes a while, but through sheer luck, Burhan manages to not die. TehSnakerer fell. That town is now ran by the Coin Guard, and this doesn't alter anything whatsoever. I'm not kidding. This game is so consequence-averse, the collapse of an entire city's leadership can't make anything budge. Naturally, I shot over to TehSnakerer right away. I was greeted with one difference, and that was that Torsten stood in Cornelia's place with people praying towards him, and he looks so unbelievably mad.
Commander?
Disunited. To what do I owe this visit?
Yeah, of course. Why should I expect anything more?
I will leave you to your business.
Good.
What were you planning to get out of this? In this reality, Constantine has a fitting punishment for the rebels.
We shall have them pledge allegiance to the Congregation of Merchants.
Well, Petrus, I'm pretty sure that blackmail you were lying about wouldn't have helped this head case. I mean, it's not like we can do that quest now, right?
How can she be a threat to him? She no longer controls San Mateus.
That is true, but her status as a refugee of the court gives her ample opportunities to manipulate your cousin's opinions.
Oh yeah, you just can't waste any content, can you? So by now, I've jumped back and forth in time to different events at leisure, as they're mostly a meandering mush. I'm now just going to slide through some events, making fun and minor points along the way to the next actual topic. Remember the ruins? Can't blame you if you didn't. Well, it turns out that there are a few more up on a hill above a mine. No one has been able to get up there yet due to a terminal lack of ladders. But by fixing a gate with instructions for fixing it in an adjacent box and killing animals who somehow survive in here, we're up. Wow, a congregation seal! It was us! Just like that whole point I made ages ago, it's the undermining of adventure, no pun intended. The game treats this as a grand adventure. No one has been able to breach this hilltop, but it's so insultingly easy to do that I feel a little bit patronized. Anyway, the Nauts may know what's up here. Ah, fuck. And after getting sent on a missing persons investigation for them, it turns out the Inquisitors are getting a bit peeved that they need to depend on Masters of the Sea to travel by sea. We also break into a warehouse and learn the Nauts aren't magic. Turns out they're just sailors. I crack jokes, but I do actually like this reveal. It doesn't go anywhere, even if you spill the beans.
Nor objects of any ritual, nor even anything magical.
You don't like it, Vasco? Leave the party. Oh, you won't, will you?
Whatever did you want to accomplish?
The Nauts are not believers. We should not be dependent on heretics.
Have you gone completely mad, Domitius? We are on an island. How could we not be dependent on the Nauts? I want them arrested. Him and every member of his order.
Listening to Cornelia chew out the Inquisitor here over this conspiracy makes me wonder how the hell this House of Cards hasn't already collapsed. We learn the congregation attempted to settle Fradee ages ago, but were run off. They kept making small-scale expeditions to the Isle here and there over the years, and turns out we're a native. The coin guard coup occurs, but you know how that is. Thélème has us investigate the demon cult village. We learn of the island spirits and question Deirdre. She tells us of a place we can commune with one of them, but it turns out to be a swamp guarded by a Nadaig. This was actually an attempt on our lives, a place expeditions had come and been killed before. Naturally, Deirdre never faces any backlash for attempting to kill the legate, and Sade never brings it up. As noted elsewhere, doing something like that would inconvenience the boring plot we're on, so it doesn't really warrant attention. So what do we learn during all of this? Well, we get some details on Enon Milfrictimen, or God as I'm just going to call them to save time. God is the island itself. Sade supposes the Malachor is a curse placed on our ancestors for having a crack at Fradee in the past. Nadaigs, those Ent things, are Donegad who bond to the island, becoming a part of it. They gradually turn into giant tree people, their form based on the biome they bond to, which gives Greedfall a small pool of bosses it can recycle over and over again. Oh, and we save an expedition of bridge scientists from the clutches of Darren. Afra then joins us. During all of this, Constantine grows sicker and sicker, so we set off to go and find a healer to give him some relief from his symptoms. We're given 3 options. Only one of them progresses the game while the other 2 characters, I shit you not, stop existing after we get Catasac, the native healer.
I shall leave immediately for New Serene.
I mean, maybe a Lololan got her. Yeah, I can actually say that word.
One of our holy men once lived at San Mateus. His healing abilities were celebrated across the land. I heard rumors that he died in the attack.
Well, that saves time. Meanwhile, the bridge points us to Tierna, who may have a lead on the cure, so we track her down.
We have heard talk from some of your people of a cure that is so powerful that it can heal almost anything. You would be...
You must share with us the formula. Too many lives are at stake.
You come here to my home, and you command me to help you. Arrogance. Renoixe.
I replayed this scene with a bunch of different companions. No matter which combo of people you bring to this scene, one of your companions will fuck it.
You would be...
My daughter, it is clear that this woman has no intention of helping us. As for this miraculous remedy, allow me to cast doubt on its very existence. The only true miracles come from the enlightened.
What the fuck, man? The only one who keeps their mouth shut no matter what is Vasco, the wisest one of us all. Sadly, whoever does mess it up does it at the exact same moment Fradee has a brain fart.
They come here to rape our lands, as did those who came before them long ago.
This miraculous cure that we've heard talk of, could you share the formula with us?
You are either completely crazed or foul liars. None of this makes sense.
But
Enough. I have lost enough time with your lies and your foolish thoughts.
So, we chase Teer through a cave and find a Bridger assassin trying to take her life. After killing the Ent, the assassin who just got his ass kicked stumbles over to the three of us and reveals his master stroke of a murder plot.
Apologies, Excellency, but you are going to die tragically from a stray bullet intended for the monster.
I respect the gusto, if not the approach.
Mercy, Your Excellency.
Fradee, angered to no end, says he'll have to go and talk to Burhan about this, which is the one time the game trusts you to remember to go and do something by yourself because that's a side quest. Anyway, Continental has been kidnapped.
I would like to have a discussion with this man alone.
Yes.
My lady, could you lead these fine people into the hallway if you would be so kind?
Certainly.
Are you people fucking serious? In a last-ditch effort to save him, Catasac took him out of the city to go and do something, but their convoy was attacked. Catasac was killed and Constantine taken. By communing with Catasac's corpse, we learn the attack was led by Vinbar, the native High King, because the natives don't understand the word princess, but do understand the word High King, but they don't have the word chief, they have the word Mal. And he's a man who's been missing for months. At this point, we need to ask one of the three important Mals for information. The warlord Deirdre, the environmentally minded Dunkus, or the business-like Ulan. In one run, this was easy because I've done all the side quests. In another one, I needed to do one side quest. I was making a point of avoiding them, but duty calls. We work really hard to be told, "Dunno mate, go ask his fam." Luckily, the isolated mountain villagers speak perfect Congregational. I ask where Vinbar is, and I'm told his wife Sarah should know. I ask where Sarah is and they don't know. After saving Sarah from some bridges through wise words or wildfire, she leads us to a cave. By studying the frescoes and finding a seed.
Given how well hidden this seed was, it must open an important passage. All we have to do is find out which.
We realize that Vinbar is headed off to become a bird tree man and he's taken Constantine up the mountain.
Who is Constantine?
So Sarah gets suspect and locks us in a cave with a massive back entrance. She also lays some mines down that don't actually kill you, they just do marginal damage.
The scholars have been slaughtered. It must have been Sarah taking her revenge.
I'm sure the history books will see it that way, Fradee. So we kill Sarah, and by going through a cave deeper into the clutches of the island than any Renaigse has ever been... Never mind, he beat us here. We find Constantine at Vinbar's mercy. We try and talk him down, but Vinbar has turned into a bird and he wants to show that off. And he is pretty assured of our cousin being evil, so we need to off him. Okay, that might sound like a lot, but trust me, I left out a ton. Mostly minutiae you have to carry out to achieve any of that. That was between 15 to 30 hours in length, depending on if you tackle the other main content. We're now in the endgame, or at least on the cusp of it. 3 days following our rescue of Constantine, we go and check on him.
He just escaped a deathly sleep, and here he is, ready to conquer the world.
Oh, you're the villain now. Gotcha, gotcha. Catasac had a Hail Mary idea, and it saved your life, but I'm gonna guess he screwed the pooch on this one. We still need to meet God. We can't just bond everyone who's sick, and we have a problem. If we're to get into the sanctuary to meet God, we need the blessing of the High King. The bad news is, I just killed the High King. The good news is we're going to rig the election. We go and meet with Glendan, who organizes these things. They'll need to select a new High King. It's going to be between those three Mals we met earlier. Fradee sets off with news of Vinbar's death and the upcoming election. I don't think Greedfall expected players to weigh up the choice presented to them here. All three conversations follow the exact same format. the breaking of the news, what they will do as High King. Then they all mention an ancient crown in a cave. They're going to go and get it. The act of getting the crown will ensure their election as High King. Sade inquires what the crown is, and then it ends. Greedfall, just give me the full dialogue for the first one of these three I talked to, because I'm going to go and ask all three of them. I need to know what I'm doing to make an informed decision. I know you haven't really thought about that in about 30 hours, but you know, yeah, just trust me on this one. I know what I'm doing. I've played a role-playing game before. Just cut the latter two conversations down to what they will do, and maybe speed up the Vinbar bit, because I understand we've got to break that news to them. Anyway, Deirdre promises she'll chase the Renaigse from Teer Fradee, while the other two are focused on peace. Ulan strikes me as young and impassioned, but he deceived me once before to screw over a rival clan. So my man Dunkus is the horse I'm betting on. On my fuck shit up run, you better believe I gave it to Deirdre. She promises will be kept around, and can pick some things she won't destroy. Now, Sade comes up with a plan I find amazingly moronic. To ensure their pick wins, they decide they're going to go and fetch the crown themselves and hand it off to them. When the way everyone was speaking about it, it seems pretty clear that the point of getting the crown isn't the crown itself, but the act of getting it. Ulan lives less than a mile from the fucking cave it's in. He has no excuse. Unlike him, Deirdre turns up and gets rightfully upset with us.
You came looking for a crown of the High King, hoping to choose the one who will lead us.
Isn't that what you were looking for as well?
Yes, but I am not a Renaigse.
See, we can't leave the election to chance and not interfere, or attempt to influence the result through diplomacy or threat of force. We could push for Deirdre pretty well by playing up how dangerous we seem, making a wartime leader desirable, or insinuate we're going to open more logging camps so that Dunkus's experience reforesting the island is a necessity, or at least seems like one. God, I said I'd drop the flight of fancy. Stop thinking, Snake, just rig the election.
Accept my defeat.
So here you go, Dunkus. Have the crown. You didn't earn it, but I think you're the best shot at peace all around. So whoever the new king is, they let us pop in and have a chat with their garden variety god.
Stay on the right-hand path and do not turn back, they say.
Soon the child that was taken has returned.
The Malachor is no curse. It's an affliction we brought on ourselves by poisoning the earth. I actually thought it was a curse even well into my second draft because of how the Malachor is presented, but hey, the big birch here is saying otherwise. There's a more pressing issue, however. God tells us our cousin has gone rotten and he's going to destroy the world, which makes Sade go, not sure about that. Then someone sneaks in and we gotta shoot off. We report back to Constantine and, well, look at him.
An intruder had managed to sneak into the sanctuary, and we had to flee to evade the wrath of its guardians.
An intruder, you say? Then I guess this sanctuary isn't that heavily protected.
He's also acting strange now. We get a choice whether or not to tell him God himself has a bounty on his head, and well, you either tell him and give him pretty good reason to be the villain, or you hide it and he makes that call for himself. Constantine also blows off the other two cities when they come asking for help. Both are being assaulted by an endless wave of animals.
Let me introduce you to the emissaries of the Bridge Alliance and the Coin Guard. Quite brazen, isn't it? That they would send us an emissary after having tried to assassinate me.
The commander must have a solid reason.
The commander was hoping that, in the face of such a threat, you would forget our past differences.
Oh, how sensitive of him. No. I really don't see how I could be of assistance to you.
Constantine, we cannot remain deaf to the call of our allies.
Yeah, of course. Why should I expect anything less?
I hope that you realize how grateful you should be to her.
Does anyone hear that? Sounds like ghostly sassing.
And of course, you also have the gratitude of the guard.
Oh hey, I found Kurt! He isn't dead! He was just hiding in the coin arena. I mean, maybe this is where guards go when they die. We fight off the creatures and, well, look at them. They have black haze coming off of them. They appear sickly and off. We can't pretend it's anything but Constantine doing this somehow. The Nardaig are going nuts as well. So, Constantine was saved by being bonded. It turns out he's running all over the place, bonding himself everywhere. Doneigad are only meant to do this once, but by doing this over and over, Constantine is killing God and becoming too powerful.
It's Constantine. With some friends.
Despite the fucking camera, we catch Constantine in the act of bonding. He tells the Nardaig to keep us here and bug us off. We kick the shit out of it, so God pipes up to say told you so. Before we hit the finale proper, let me divert one final time to talk about the story, but this time totally in macro. The pacing of all of this changes radically depending on whether or not you tackle side quests, but it's damned if you do and damned if you don't. It's the spongiest pacing I've seen in a long while. If you do the side quests, the pacing is glacial. Many hours are given over to uneventful thumb twiddling. It can be confusing recalling what is important to know, difficult to remember what is part of the actual narrative versus what happened in the extras. Only now, checking notes after every bloody sentence, can I say with confidence what was what. If you don't do side quests, the game goes, whoops, all natives. I was often confused by the things that didn't happen. Constantine's sickness progresses at light speed and it's boring yet breakneck. A lot of characters that only truly act in side content get awkwardly shuffled into the main quest, treated as though you should know them. And then you're offered a side quest as a means to get what you need. It really tries to twist your arm on that. In most RPGs, side quests are truly off to the side. The side quests are a means to explore the larger setting, flesh out world details, and tell micro stories with their own little beginnings and ends. But here they exist as part of a larger narrative means to an end-ing. It's difficult to dip in, play what you want, and when you've had your fill, go back to the main narrative, since they are designed as part of a set, one leading into another and encouraged to be resolved before returning to the actual story. And a train of thought does develop in all of this. If you follow side quests, most of the early ones concern Teleme, with the middle and approaching the end focusing more on the Bridge Alliance, with the native main quest sitting as a through line from the early game until the conclusion, with the evil turn of Constantine and God revealing that the plague continues because we poison the earth. It starts as a diatribe about how absolute faith in faith won't save us, and demonstrates the cruelties that can come about from religion free of actual morality or oversight, before it cops out. Then it turns into a diatribe about how absolute faith in science won't save us, and demonstrates the cruelties that can come about from science free from actual morality or oversight, before it cops out. Cop-out might be unfair, so to be clearer, it's more that Greedfall overplays its hand. It demonstrates incredible cruelty, raises its stakes too high and goes too dark, but when it comes time to resolve these issues, it can't stick the landing because it was never actually going anywhere with it. When I was explaining my ideal Greedfall and asked for all of these methods to be manipulative, it's not because I don't think Greedfall is cruel enough and I want Fradee to be a sociopath. It's that if you're presenting this cutthroat universe full of scheming and brutality, and in the intro Fradee demonstrates great diplomatic savvy that allows him to fight this or benefit from it, let me actually inhabit that world and manipulate that savvy. I mean, I generally play goody two-shoes in these games, but I like to cut loose and be a bastard for these videos. But you see, Spiders is the edgy 12-year-old of the middleware market. It thinks itself deep because it knows human cruelties exist, but it hasn't actually internalized or came to anything but the most basic conclusions about these cruelties yet, and so it can't say anything about them really. It can just present them. And then at the 11th, 19th, 39th hour, it pivots to an environmentalist tale. All that can save us is caring for the earth, that our woes are brought on by us poisoning the ground beneath our feet. It's not a clean train of thought, but it makes it to the station, with a few missing doors and most of the cargo missing. I am left with questions, granted just for the sake of prodding. So, curing the world cures the plague? Should Constantine not have been improving by being in the clean environment of Teer Fradee? Or is it all about the land you're bonded to, so he's just genetically open to the Malachor? The Nauts are immune, but is Vasco? We're immune because we're genetically Teer Fradean, but consider ourselves to be a citizen of Cocaine. Meanwhile, Vasco is a Naut, but, you know, he is of Congregation stock. I'm just being a shit. A lot of themes break if you think about the mechanics too much. This is just me having fun at its expense. What's important is that Constantine is cured, but he has genuinely poisoned the land by bonding to it. His brush with death scared him shitless, and now he's bonding all over the place in the hopes of gaining immortality, which will kill the island, if not the world, if he's not stopped. So, I'm done being a shit for the moment. Unlike the finale, which is just shit. With Constantine on the run, the party seemingly just knows how a bunch of things are going to shake out.
Yet he has a personal guard. He's bound to have warned them against us after what happened. And we're gonna need an army. Alone against all of these creatures will be no match for them.
Constantine will attack the sanctuary with an army of animals to try and overthrow God, and we'll need an army of our own to stop him. Sure, why not? Fradee gives a really weak speech.
What an absurd project. On the continent they would brand us crazy, but not here. On an island where everything is possible, and all folly is accepted. Let us go. We need to put an end to all of this.
Maybe it's because I don't feel this has been a land of wonder. Maybe it's because by now I just don't like anyone. Perhaps it's because I knew this was leading to 6 conversations minimum. But this speech makes my skin crawl. It's so presumptuous and faux grand. Fradee would be more honest if he just looked right into the camera and said, "Yeah, fuck it, we all knew this was coming. Let's get on with it." Somehow, this speech is worse in the run where everyone loved me. In the bad run, it at least had a comedic edge since I had ruined everything. Not that much was really different. Kurt was dead and Siora was upset, but they made roughly as much noise being that way. Wait, hang on. While you're here, Petrus, you still thinking... Mate, I think my cousin can fucking handle Cornelia. You need new bait for this hook. Alright, so let's go build a bloody army. We also need to do other shit along the way, like repeat 2 boss fights. Guess what? Everyone can work together. And if you've done all the side quests, they will do so without argument. Thanks for doing your chores, Fradee. We'll help you clean up the rest. Alright, one last trek back to Technomancer for a comparative complaint. It had a similar objective. The payoff was weak as shit, but the process of building an alliance was at least more involved. In Technomancer, some groups wouldn't work with others. You needed to think about the relations set in place by the setting. This moment was a culmination of choices. In Greedfall, this moment is a culmination of hours. Here, with a somewhat undercooked idea of unification, you can get everyone working together. And I think I'd be okay with this if they leaned into it whatsoever. This is the final stage, the last hurrah. Perhaps the last experience we will have in this world ever. And with the work put in, this should feel like a pivotal turning point. And I don't think the mark could have been missed further. Thanks to that speech, by the time we arrive in the sanctuary, Constantine has broken through and is facing down God, so we give chase. It sees us trekking up a hill, fighting waves of creatures, of which I've killed thousands by this point, if not tens of thousands. All of our companions join us, and there are checkpoints along the winding road as we ascend. Each of these checkpoints are manned by 1 or 2 factions. No matter how cliche it is, this is an opportunity to hit us with some cathartic bullshit, like an Inquisitor yelling, "Oh, I can't believe I'm fighting alongside a native," or, you know, any variation of that. Instead, in one final hurrah, not for the world, but for the absolute arse-shattering power of doing nothing of weight or impact, the checkpoints are Coin Garden Bridge, Norton Native, and Telemate all by themselves. Greedfall, you can't stick one fucking landing. It can't stick a fucking landing when it has people on the runway waving you in. People that you have hired to do it. You managed to pair up everyone with the group with which they share no fucking beef whatsoever. I know, that makes sense. That's what people would naturally do. But that's not what we're here for. This should be the moment that a common enemy in Constantine has forced bitter enemies to work together, has united them and opened the doors for ceasefire, repaired relations, newfound friends and allies. But it doesn't do any of that. Meanwhile, in the bad run, we head up the hill by our lonesome. Our allies breaking off to fight alone. And when we confront Constantine... Oh, hang on a second. And when we confront Constantine, he asks if we'd like to join him, rule as gods together. Come. Nah, put 40 hours into cleaning this shithole.
night, sweet prince.
Well, that got a laugh out of me and a fuck off out of me. Meanwhile, in the other run, well, I've burnt enough bridges. May as well torture the one with mortality. World's fucked either way. And so we get some ending slides. Remember Corsilion? By now, I've not heard him for 20 hours, but he'll see us off.
Some of their Donegada were even invited to the continent, and with their help, it slowly became a land filled with life again.
I do love how it has to include that every companion really liked us and definitely visited even though they have a cool new job. I don't have abandonment issues, Greedfall. I'm alright never seeing them again.
She now spends most of her time with them. When she isn't with the man she loves, of course.
Oh yeah, I did romance her. Meanwhile, in another reality, Corsilion is shit scared.
Who could have predicted, when my 2 young students left the port of Serene, that they'd become the gods of Teer Fradee, thus plunging the world into chaos? Certainly not me. So it seems that I am a poor teacher. All our nations sunk into a state of constant warfare, each accusing the others of being responsible for their terrible defeat. The congregation is now on the verge of falling, and I have no doubt that the others will follow. The lives which haven't been taken by war will be taken by the Malicor. The survivors reportedly all ended up acknowledging the power of the 2 cousins. But sadly, this is nothing but hearsay, since the news we receive is scarce, and getting even more so.
And in the third ending, where I was evil and killed Constantine,
Deirdre kept her promise. She led all the native clans as they managed to drive the invaders off their island. Afra set aside her weapons and went back to her research on the native culture and flora of the island.
wow, I guess she wasn't that boring. I have no idea how she's doing that. In all of this, there are hours and hours of Greedfall I feel a need to talk about, to complain and be embittered towards, but I would be belaboring one of the many points I have against it. So many side quests, so many throwaway characters, so many setting details that technically exist but don't do anything for the setting or for the player. They don't intrigue, they don't wonder, they don't amaze. I want to complain, but it would be a waste of all of our time. It would not be a worthy exercise for me to make and for you to watch anymore. Greedfall is meticulously engineered tedium. It sets up so much that could be interesting, so much that could be used to raise an eyebrow or make me think about what I'm really doing. But it always seems to forget what it can do, while being one of the slowest, most meandering experiences I've ever had. Yet, I still feel hurried along, hurried past anything that might raise the heart rate and make me feel alive. It's a man who peels an orange to toss the fruit and eat the rind. And during that, you had to uncomfortably watch, not allowed to touch the orange. Sorry, I've been going at this for hours and that's the metaphor we're going with. I know this video is long. This isn't actually the worst game I've ever covered, but it's definitely up there for boredom. Thanks to everyone who's still here, because I imagine I'll sound pretty bloody haggard by this point, and like an absolute curmudgeon by now. To those who like Greedfall, who told me all that time ago that spiders have finally done it, I promise I wasn't looking for negatives here. I'm not being a contrarian. This was, to me, the distilled experience of playing Greedfall, which is experiencing a world that was entirely surface level, experienced via mechanics not fit for the purpose they need to carry out but jury-rigged into place, role-playing interfaces that have the most limited and hackneyed methods to allow you to play a role. Character setups more interesting than how they are actually used, characters that are mere tools, and the quest design and plotting is slow, awkward, and tedious. I do still have a soft spot for spiders, and I am happy for the success, but my word, Greedfall has to be the most shallow, boring thing that I have ever played. If there is not a serious shake-up with their next title, this may be the last Spiders-related game that I cover, because with this video, I wanted to break that boredom down into how it's evoked, and I hope I've done that. So thank you for watching. This was TehSnakerer, and that was a conclusion as awkward as the bloody game I'm amending it to. If you want to support me, please spread this video around. If you want to help directly, I do have a Patreon. Everyone who donates gets thanked like the lovely people scrolling past now. And they get access to a Patreon exclusive Discord. Everyone at every tier gets that. At $3, you get access to my scripts and notes, which are big buggers, especially right now. And at $5, you get access to bonus afterthought videos covering any last second thoughts and answering questions asked by those in that tier. There is a channel on the Discord to submit questions, but I do also check Patreon comments. I hope you all had fun. I hope 2020 is good. I'm probably going to go and sleep for a week. Have fun. Jesus, that was over 2 hours. And Yakuza 4 is next. Fucking hell.